made me think about when you look at the standings, the 7th seeded teams in the Western Conference and in the Eastern Conference. It's the Lakers in the West, Celtics in the East. I don't think I ever would have thought that both of these teams would be in trouble. But right now they're both on the outside looking in the play-in tournament. And it's hard to fathom that this is the type of question that would be posed, because when you look at the Lakers and the Celtics, these are the two most storied franchises with the greatest basketball tradition and heritage, the two most winningest franchises in NBA history, tied for the most NBA championships, 17 in NBA history. This is a Lakers team that just came off winning the NBA title last season. The Boston Celtics came off a tremendous run, reaching the Eastern Conference Finals, losing in Game 6 to the Miami Heat just a season ago. And now they find themselves in this situation where they're both sitting in the 7th seed. Now, to me, it's less about the fact that they are in the 7th seed, and more it has to do with the manners in which they've reached this point and the journeys that they've had to traverse this season. And that is why, to me, the Celtics are much more in trouble than the LA Lakers. Because this is a Celtics team that, even when fully healthy, when fully loaded, their issues have existed and persisted throughout this entire season. The Lakers' issues have all been due to injuries. The Celtics have had consistency issues and a lack of depth throughout the entire season. This is a team that, without a rookie point guard in Peyton Pritchard and without a Frenchman in Evan Fournier, who you traded for from the Orlando Magic, that's your bench. You've got Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. Kemba Walker has been a shell of himself, and I really like Kemba Walker. I hate to see him have to agonize with ailing knee injuries and not being able to play up to the level that we expect. He's been hit and miss all season. They don't really have much size. I like Robert Williams, but he's maybe borderline a starting center. Tristan Thompson is old, and yes, he can defend and rebound, but really you're looking at Evan Fournier and Payne Pritchard as the two guys that make up your bench. And this is a Celtics team that, again, they lost the Miami Heat 130 to 124. You're going to look at the final score and say, well, this was a competitive game. But they trailed by 26 points at one point. They trailed by 20 points at the half. This is a team in the Boston Celtics that has now trailed teams by at least 20 points in 3 out of their last 5 games. In fact, they've lost 3 of their last 4 games. Should have been 4 of their last 4 games, but somehow they pulled off a spirited comeback, a miraculous comeback against the San Antonio Spurs when they trailed by 32 points on the road and won in overtime. Otherwise, they would have lost 4 consecutive games. This is a Boston Celtics team that has trailed an opponent by at least 20 points in 13 games this year. A team that used to be top 6 in defense each of the last 3 seasons, and now this year they've fallen to 11th, which, of course, isn't egregiously bad. But the standards and the level of play has vacillated this entire season. So for the Celtics, this has been a persistent issue. This isn't just an anomaly. This isn't just an aberration. The Lakers' struggles are because of injuries. This is an injury-riddled roster. When LeBron James was healthy, when everyone was healthy, there weren't any questions or concerns about the Lakers. They were riding a top 4 seed in the Western Conference comfortably. And they came out of the gates slow. And now AD has the Achilles injury. LeBron James suffers the high ankle sprain. Dennis Schroeder is in the NBA's COVID safety protocols. He's expected to miss at least another 10 days. And yet, you have one team in the Boston Celtics who at times show glimmer of potential, They beat the Milwaukee Bucks 2 out of 3 times. They beat the Clippers both games this year. And then a couple days ago, you lose to a team in the Chicago Bulls by 22 points on the road. Now, I like Zach LaVine. I like Nikola Vucevic. I like Kobe White. I like the Chicago Bulls, but the Celtics shouldn't be losing to the Bulls by 22 points on the road. It should be a single digits loss if you're going to lose at all. You really should win, but if you're going to lose, it should be single digits, not 22. The Lakers just beat the Phoenix Suns. They beat the brakes off the Phoenix Suns last night. They won by 13 points, 123 to 110. They led the entire way, the majority of the game by double digits. Anthony Davis gave you his best performance of the season, finally looking like his full true self with 42 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocks, 3 steals. But this was a Lakers team that faced a fully loaded Phoenix Suns team with plenty on the line for a number 1 seed. They played them and beat them handedly without LeBron, without Dennis Schroeder, and without Kyle Kuzma. So, not to mention, when you look at the potential 7-8 matchups, let's just say for the sake of argument, Lakers lose to a red-hot Golden State Warriors team as a 7-8 matchup, and the Celtics lose to an up-and-coming LaMelo Ball and the Charlotte Hornets. The Spurs and the Grizzlies, to me, strike much less fear than potentially the Washington Wizards do in the Eastern Conference. So if both the Lakers and the Celtics found themselves in this precarious situation where they're in the play-in tournament, they lose the initial 7-8 matchup, and now have to face the winner in the 9-10 matchup, the Washington Wizards would strike a whole lot more fear in the Celtics than both the Grizzlies or the Spurs could strike in the Lakers. And that's the difference. So the Celtics have a lot more to be concerned about and to be worried about than the Lakers, because at least the Lakers have a somewhat built-in excuse for their precipitous fall in the standings. The Celtics have no excuse. They reached the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They should be a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference this year. At the very minimum, a top 5 seed if you want to give Miami more credit and say, okay, Miami, Milwaukee, the Brooklyn Nets, and the 76ers should be better than the Celtics. Okay, fine. But for the Celtics to be behind the New York Knicks, and again, this isn't a shot at New York, but the Celtics should be better. And it's troubling that, yes, they've been staging these second half comebacks, and Brad Stevens has tried to shoulder the load and the blame and say that he's got to get his guys to play harder and better right out of the gates in the first half. Okay, that's all good. That lip service is good. I appreciate Brad Stevens saying that, but it feels redundant at this point because he's been saying it every single week, and at some point it's the players that have to step up and do their job. So I'd be much more worried if I was the Celtics than the Lakers when we're looking at both of these two 7th-seeded teams.